but we're here for this week's issue of the podcast. For those of you who don't know us, I'm Bobby Ware in tech support.
My name's Jaden Wiley, and I work in Gamble sales, helping match people up with the machine that fits their needs.
And today we have with us right now Jenn Lensing. Lensing, is that how you pronounce it? Okay. And we're hoping to have another guest come on and join us. They were having some technical difficulties, so they might join us as we go on. But if not, we will do just great with Jenn. So we ready to get started here?
Absolutely. Jenn, feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself to the people watching and tell them a little about yourself.
Okay, great. I'm Jenn, and I own Sierra Quilt Company. And I've been long arming for about 3 years. We live in El Dorado County between like Mount Shasta and Lake Tahoe in California. And so that's it. I'm married. We have 4 boys.
Very good. So how long have you been long arm quilting?
3 years. For 3 years is all.
And have you had a gamble for those 3 years?
I have. I started out with hand guided and then went to Elevate, and then very soon realized that I needed the Statler. Through education, I realized that this can do way more than what the Elevate can do. So I upgraded to the Ascend.
So how long did you do the hand guided before you went?
I did that for less than a year, and then I got the Elevate. I'm pretty much 100% computer dependent, so I'm not a hand guider. Like I can do pantographs, but I'm not someone who can go, oh, I'll put a little fill in here. And so I did the hand guided for less than a year. Then I did Elevate, and I had Elevate for about a year. And then I was for one, I needed the speed of Ascend because I was so busy to keep those turnaround times. I was working 7 days a week, and it was hard. And so I had wanted to wait until we retired to buy the Ascend, when I have a bigger studio and can get the 14-foot table and the 30-inch head. And I talked to Gamble Sales, and they said, why don't you do the Ascend now so you can get that speed and then just buy another one when we move up. So ultimately, that's what I decided to do.
So, but I wanted to ask one other thing. So did you start out with a hand guided, or did you start out with having a Statler?
No, she started with a hand.
No, I started with hand guided.
Okay. And you went from hand guided to Statler, and then you went from Statler to the Ascend.
No, I went from hand guided to Elevate, then Elevate to the Statler Ascend.
I would listen. I would know these things.
That's okay.
We're starting off tonight's podcast with Bobby deciding
come on, Bobby, get with the
words
program.
He's going to retain.
I'm gonna bop him on the head before this is over with.
So Jenn, what made you decide to long arm? What made you decide to get your first?
Well, you know, an accident. Our son died in an accident, and I hadn't sewed. I sewed for like 40 years, and I just didn't make time for it anymore. So I got my sewing machine out, and I had a ton of quilts that I was making, trying to heal my heart from Ben's death. And I thought, well, I can either long arm them myself or send them out. And I'm a doer. That's my usual MO. So I decided to buy a long arm.
Wow. Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. I wasn't aware.
Oh, it's okay.
Part of your story. And so that had a lot to do with
that. Had all of it to do with it. He was always telling me, follow your dreams, and you know, life's an adventure, Mom. You got to get out there and adventure. So I took a chance.
So you know, your machine and the quilting was very therapeutic for you in the recovery process.
Yes, huge. It was everything, and I was able to dive into that, and it's been great.
So when you went into long arming, was it just start out just for you personally?
Personal use, correct. And then it was really quickly I realized, you know, I could like make money doing this, and I love it. I mean, I love it so much I put in 16-hour days sometimes because I just love it. You know, I'm home, I have nothing else to do. And so yeah, I just love it.
And how long was it after you started doing it that you started going into doing it business wise?
Within months.
whenever you decided that you were going to get a long arm, what made you go with a gamble? How long was your shopping process?
Well, I looked around, I looked at other brands, and my friend had a Gamble, and I went over and I really liked the way her machine was built and all that. And as soon as we looked at the Gamble seriously, we knew that it was the best. So if you're gonna get the best.
Sure.
Gotcha. So when you started pursuing the business part of it, did you know if there were enough long arm, was enough business in your area, or
I
tell us a little
didn't.
bit about that?
I didn't. I did no market research. There's things that I would go back and do differently because I just winged this as I went along. But I didn't know. I thought that if you give excellent customer service and you put out a great product, that word of mouth will help you build your business organically. And it's proven to be pretty true. I mean, that's a word of mouth is my business. That's everything for me. That's where I get all my business is word of mouth. I mean, I hustle for business too, but most of
You
it comes from word of mouth.
so you found that it's grown a lot since you started
Oh yeah.
this?
Yeah, I do about 25 to 30 quilts a month. Probably I do over 300 a year.
Wow. So
So,
I guess since you didn't really have any introductory knowledge of the quilting market when you bought it,
right.
did you do anything in that first year, advertising wise, business cards to get
I
your name?
did. Anything I can do, I do. I did. I'm looking for my page now. I did anything that I can do. Like, I mean, one day the UPS guy came and dropped off a bolt of batting, and he said it was a third one he had delivered in our neighborhood that day. And I thought, well, if people are buying bolts of batting, they surely have quilts that need long arming. And so on the neighborhood watch, I went, and pretty much if it can be done, I've done it. Social media, advertising, I printed really nice business cards. My business is built on quality, and so every time I can put to the public quality, I do. So business cards, top of the line, I do everything kind of nice, and I just hand them out. I go to guild meetings. That's not my thing at all. I don't like going to guild meetings, and I don't really have time for it, but I do it. And yeah, so that's what I do. I mean, I've worked for it. The dream is free, the hustle is sold separately.
That's a good way to put it.
I
Yep.
need to write that down. The dream
Yeah,
is
it's a good one.
hustle is sold separately. Well, listen, when you first got your first gamble, how did you finance that? How did you pay for that when you first
I
started?
financed mine through AFP on a 5-year loan, knowing
Mhm.
that that would be paid off by the time we moved to Mount Shasta. Because my goal is to build this business so that when we live in Mount Shasta and are retired, I can still work and hopefully make our house payment. You know, we're building a house in California, so we're going to have a pretty substantial house payment. And so in retirement, which we hadn't planned on. And so my husband's a retired sheriff, well, will be a retired sheriff. So we have a retirement, but I want to be able to make the house payment. So that is my goal, to build the business and then keep working.
Well, so you've owned the machine for 3 years. You're
Mm-hmm.
doing upwards of 300 quilts a
Yeah.
year. So you're just kind of milking that 5-year loan, retaining as much as you can. You haven't paid
Yeah.
any
It's on a
interest.
5-year write off, and I'll get another machine at 5 years to have another write off and start over and have two machines.
Right
Hopefully,
on.
my goal is by the time 5 years hits, I'll need that second machine. So, obviously, if I don't have the clientele to support it, I won't buy it. But I think I will. Most of the clientele I've built has been not in 3 years. It's really been in the last year and a half, because it's really been since I've had robotics.
Hmm.
I didn't really put myself out there much when I was hand guiding. I mean, and I told people, like, this is not my thing. This is not what I do. So I'll do it for you as a super cheap price, because this isn't like, I didn't really start the business of doing it until I had robotics.
So, when your machine was hand guided, it sounds like you were intimidated and that caused some
Oh, for sure.
apprehension to you really putting yourself out there because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were,
I just didn't feel like that. I knew that if I was going to build a business, I wanted to build it on quality. And I don't feel that my hand guiding is the quality that I want to put out and my business to represent. So I didn't really put it out there.
Sure. So, do you have another job at this time?
I do. I do. I work in the ICU 10 shifts a month, but I'm on call a lot, so I really only work like maybe 4 or 5. And so I still do that until I'm turning away clients. I'm going to do both, and I'm not turning away anybody right now.
So how many hours a week would you say you put into the quilting?
Probably at least 30. Yeah, at least 30. Maybe a little less now with this end. It's
So,
also a busy month because it's
yeah,
December.
you're putting in close to a normal work week.
Yeah. I mean,
That
if
little bit
I
from your job is just enough to help.
Yeah, if I hustle and I mean, one night I did 6 quilts. I worked for 16 hours straight, but I did
One
six for the
night.
ascent in one night. Yep. So I could do more, I could be better with my time, but I
With
don't
enough
need,
caffeine.
yeah, with enough.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you pretty much just do edge-to-edge computerized quilting now. Is that correct?
I do edge to edge and I do custom. I do a little bit of custom. So I'll do trim work, things like that the computers can basically do. And then I've done like a triple Irish chain and a double wedding ring and kind of easy things like that. But if I wanted to branch more into custom work, I would start entering my quilts into like to get awards and recognition. And I'm just not there yet.
Well, I've already heard your sales pitch on your custom work. I don't really like to do it, but I'll do it if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can see which side of that.
Well, and if you're looking at it for a business, edge to edge is really where your money's at. I
Well,
mean,
it's what
Quantity. You can do
people
it.
people
yeah,
are more comfortable with spending what you charge for an edge-to-edge quilt
right.
than I think most people are with custom quilting. And I guess in addition to that, is there a certain percentage of the amount of quilts you do that are custom, or 20% or a quarter?
No, no, not right now. It's like a handful of quilts at this
Okay.
point that I've done
With
that are
1%.
1%, right?
That's good. That's good information. Do you charge by the hour or
I
by
do
the
not.
square
I
inch?
charge by the square inch. And do you want to know what I charge or
Yeah.
okay, so I charge 2.0275,
Mhm.
so 2 and 3/4 cents for most fill. I have a budget one for just basic meander. It's one meander. I use BAM from Urban Elements, and it's a 1.0175. I've only had one person ever need it or ask for it. And so I offer that for like more of a budget quilting. And then most of my fill falls into 275. I charge extra like 3.5 for snowflakes and things that take forever to stitch out. But
So if you an average queen size quilt, what would you ballpark say that?
an average quilt would be, probably 275 to 300
Mhm.
for the quilting plus batting. What that includes the batting because I charge an extra for the batting. I do 14. I carry Quilter's Dream because
Mhm.
I think it's the best, and I charge $14 a yard for that. So that's added in, and that usually runs about 30 something on a queen. It's cheaper for them to buy the batting through me than it is for them to buy it in a bag retail, and I'm making money too. So it's a
Everybody
win-win.
wins.
Right. You
Well,
got it.
and
That's business, Bobby.
that's correct. 275-ish. That's a little bit on the higher end of what we've heard some people say their average queen
Okay.
size quilt is, but you're in
I'm
California.
in California, and my business is people don't come to me because I'm the cheapest. They
Mhm.
come to me because I give a great customer experience. The quality of work is phenomenal. I work with people. I do a lot of extra stuff. I give people a little gift when I give them their quilt. They get a canvas tote. They get, everything's packaged. They have printed labels on my quilts. I tie on printed labels that are printed professionally that have washing instructions, and they don't come to me because I'm the cheapest,
No
and
wonder you're
that's
doing
okay.
300 quilts a year.
So that sounds like it feeds into that word of mouth thing. So
Loyalty and word of mouth. I need my clients to be loyal, because you're in a niche market as a long arm quilter. My people are quilters, and there's only so many of them. So I need my people to be loyal to me. And so I do whatever I can. Customer acquisition is going to be your hardest thing in this business. But once you have a customer, you've got to retain them.
So, about how many quilts a year are you making, would you say?
About 300, 350, over 300 probably.
Okay.
And you said that so much of your growth has occurred in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you've done probably 300 or a little more this year. How many did you do last year when you were still growing pretty substantially?
I know I really should know these numbers. I was doing last year maybe like 15 a month, 20 some months. It's really grown organically. I didn't have some boom event. I didn't have any, it's really just built and snowballed on itself. Like one customer, every time I have a happy customer, they talk to 10 people, and they're talking to 10 people in San Francisco, 10 people on the East Coast, 10 people in Boston that I would never have access to. And so that's my best advertisement, really, because they're talking to people that have no access to me.
And that's something I was wanted to ask you about also is you're not are the majority or is the vast majority of your customers like close around
all
you?
over all over. And for customer acquisition on that is word of mouth. I do have a listing on Etsy, and in 2 years I think I have gotten maybe a dozen clients from it. So that's definitely not an avenue but it's there. It's free. It's what, I list the deposit, a $25 deposit, because you have to list something. Mm-hmm. And then, Etsy takes a percentage of that. And so I list it there because it's not that much, and it might as well. I have a quilt shop also on Etsy, an e-commerce quilt shop. And I do that too. And so, it kind of goes with my shop. So I have it in there.
Sure. Now, in addition to your long arm services, you said that you provide batting. I'm assuming now you provide fabric.
I do. I do. Yeah. If they need backing, blenders are my jam. So I have a ton. I have the whole collection of 3 different blenders. So we can always find the color that they want or something. And then if I do people's binding, I include the fabric in that. It doesn't cost me much, and it's just nice for them. And I've always had people love that I do that, and they just can pick whatever fabric they want. And it's costing me less than $10. And it's such a nice thing to do for the client,
Well, it kind of streamlines the process from them beginning to end.
Yeah.
Well, let's pause just a minute. It looks like our other guests may have shown up.
Hi,
Linda. Welcome to the party.
Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Boy, that was something. I don't know what was going on there.
It's okay. Fashionably late is good for a lot of things like this. So that's great.
I'm glad you think that, because I felt really bad. I don't know what happened, but I always say technology is great right up until it isn't.
That is exactly right. Well, we've spent the last 20 minutes with Jenn here. We have a few more questions that we intend to ask her. Whenever we're done with these questions with Jenn, we will give you a moment to introduce yourself, and we will let you answer all of the questions we have for you tonight. And of course, Jenn at that time will be able to collaborate with any question you guys come up with.
Right on.
I can tell you, Linda, while we're talking to Jenn, if you hear something that we're talking about and you want to jump in there and contribute, feel free. There's
okay.
We're just all family here, so
great. Thank you.
So we were talking to Jenn. She said that she offered batting, fabrics, all kinds of things. I'm interested to know if you also offer binding or piecing services, and what you charge for those if you do.
I do. I offer all the binding. I offer machine binding, heirloom prep, which is machine on one side, they sew it on the back. And then I offer heirloom binding, but that's time permissive, and I have that on my website. That's not always available because I just don't always have time to hand bind and really I charge so much for it. I don't know that anybody will ever. I had one person get it so far in 2.5 years. So,
gotcha.
But a lot of people have me do machine binding. You'd be surprised, and I'm not cheap. I charge 25 cents a linear inch for it.
Okay.
I have a
Go ahead, Linda.
I have a funny story about that. When I first was in business, maybe about 2 or 3 years, I had this lady that lived on Central Park West as a client, and she would send me these quilts, and I would custom quilt them to death. And she called me one time. She said, "Linda, I always mess up your beautiful quilting with the binding. Could I pay you to do the binding?" And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do binding. So this was a twin size quilt. And now you got to remember, this is like 25 years ago. And I threw out a price of $150, thinking there's no way this woman is going to pay me to sew it down on the front so she could flip it over and hand sew it on the back. And she goes, "Okay, that'd be great." And I was like, no.
You didn't want it for $150.
No, I didn't. But I did a lot of binding for her. She was probably the only client.
Well, I would do it for that too.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, that's
so
funny.
Jenn, as we're getting into the last few questions with you, considering our, the target audience for this podcast, people that are either thinking of starting a business or in maybe some of the early stages, or just need some guidance with that.
Yeah.
What would you say has been the hardest part of growing your business?
For me, it's been the business end. It's been growing pains with trying to keep up with I have Machine Quilter's business software. I don't use it. I have QuickBooks. I don't use it. My accountant hates me. I show up with everything like it's 1992. Printed receipts, printed invoices, everyone from
Got everything in a
Amazon,
big tub or
Checker,
something.
all the major manufacturers. I bring printed, like a stack that's this big of printed receipts. And so this is my New Year's resolution, to get better at business, because I'm just really doing a poor job at that.
But when the accountant sees you coming, they lock the door.
They do.
Now, one thing, this is one of the best questions, to kind of see into your world, but who was your biggest cheerleader or support system in getting a machine and starting quilting?
I had a good friend, my good friend Denise, my best friend. She cheered me on the whole way, and then my husband and my son Chris, and yeah. Everybody's been, "You can do this, Jenn, you can do this." I mean, because I started out for personal use, and then, people started to see what I was doing, and they're like, "You should do this." And so that kind of is what gave me the confidence to take a leap and start a new adventure.
Wow. Well, you have done it.
And I'm a worker, so yeah.
Yeah, and your story is really inspirational. You've got a really unique story,
This is a business with the robotics anybody could do.
Yeah.
But like I said, the dream is free, the hustle is sold separately. You gotta work for it. You gotta, business is not gonna just float your way. You gotta put yourself out there. But I love what I do. Love it.
So do you feel like you're more because you've been doing this for 3 years?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're in a more flexible position for your own life, money wise and schedule wise, because of your quilting?
Right now, I put everything back into the business because I'm building it with that goal for retirement, to be able to pull a $5,000 house payment out. So I want to be able to put everything back in and build that business to be as big and best as it can be. And so flexibility money wise, it hasn't done much for me because I'm not taking a draw. But time wise, it's really just made me busier because I'm already like doing a job, and now I have another job, and I have the shop that I send orders out on every day. But in 3 years, when we retire, it's going to be invaluable. The flexibility, and when Mike's retired, for me to have a flexible schedule, and it's just, you can't even put a price on that. And the money, I mean, for me, I've always lived off my husband. To be able to make a payment like myself, that's huge. A house payment,
Yeah, you having the foresight to kind of set yourself up for that success
Yeah.
3 years from now, and at the time you bought your machine 6 years from then.
Even though right now you're just as poor and maybe busier than you were before.
Definitely busier.
We know those things don't always come
But
easy.
that was, I
But
bought
you've
my
got a
machine with
target
a plan.
Yeah.
I have a plan. I have a
Yeah.
vision.
So in terms of your vision as a whole, what is one thing you wish someone told you before you got started?
They did tell me by the step. Do not piecemeal your machine like I did. I piecemealed my machine. I went from hand guided to Elevate to Statler, and it cost me over 60 grand to do it that way, for one. And the other thing is I just lost valuable time when I could have been making money.
And
And
somebody told you that beforehand and you didn't do it?
yeah. And I thought, oh, it's good enough, which I'm not a good enough person. I usually buy top of the line car, top of the line everything. And I thought, well, Elevate will be good enough for what I want to do. And it just, there's so much. And Elevate was good. It is good. And if you're only going to do edge to edge, it is kind of good enough. But there's so much I've learned through going to Summit Retreat and all this classes that the Statler can do that I want to be able to do. And so that is the one thing. That and yeah, just buy the right machine out of the gate. That would be my big pro tip.
Well, Jenn, thank you so much for answering our questions and sharing with everyone at this point.
And before we move on to the other, Jenn, do you have like a website or any?
I do. Yeah. I have a website, and I actually have a pretty extensive website that I
put your info here, and we'll kind of repeat it at the end also.
Oh, nice. It's www.sierraquiltco.com. And it's got a whole section that's all things long arm, everything. And I'm totally transparent. Prices, time, there's Q&A, there's testimonials, there's information about me, there's information about long arm quilting itself, and information about the gamel. So yeah, it's a good resource, and I do pay for that. It's I think it's like a little under 300 a year, but it's all building the business. You got to pay to play.
Just another way that people can find you. So
yeah, and people do find me that way. I've gotten more business from my website than I have from my Etsy listing. And I really don't get a lot off social media, and other people do. And I think it's because my posting habits aren't great because I'm busy, so I don't have as much time to post. But I need to get better with that. I should make that a New Year's resolution too, because I do need to post better on social media, because I think that's a good avenue for customer acquisition for people. It's just I'm not that good at social media. So
sure, you can answer
that. Before we move on to Linda, there's we have a question. Jenn, Sandy's asking, Jenn, when you have multiple quilts lined up to quilt, do you use an extra set of zipper leaders for quick change to the next quilt?
So I have them, but I just got them like maybe 3 months ago. And I've always used red snappers. And if you quilt, you'll be familiar with red snappers. And red snappers they require a little bit of leeway for room to, and then also when you take the leader off, you have the snapper rod in it. And so I went to sew tights basically to avoid that bump going under the take up roller and needing to require more space for the snapper rod. And then the sew tights allow me to be able to take the zippers off and actually fold the quilt up and store it away while I'm doing another quilt, because you can't do that when you have red snappers because there's a big long rod in the quilt, or in the leader. So yeah, that's how I use my zipper leaders. Like not much yet, but I have hot plans for them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and answering that for Sandy. She is a new machine owner.
Oh, you'll love it.
Recently got her Statlers, so she
get going, girl. This is a great business.
Absolutely. So Linda, please feel free to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell them a little about yourself, and then we will get on to asking you some questions.
Well, I am a lifelong quilter. I made my first quilt at 9. My mother was a seamstress, garment maker, but she was into quilting, but it was during the Depression, and quilts were for people that couldn't afford to buy blankets. So she wasn't big on the quilts, and she had, several from the 30s and, from her younger years. But the bicycle crafts of making your own butter and candles, and quilting was one of those things. And I got bit by the bug, and I made my first quilt, at a very young age, and kind of dabbled in it, in my teen years. And then when I got into my 20s and got my own house, I wanted a quilt for the bed. So I started, and now you have to remember, this is before the internet, before the rotary cutter.
Some people don't know about those times.
I know. So, and I just fell in love with it. And I was for years hand quilting. And then I realized, as the quilt tops were stacking up and my production was very slow, because I also had a full-time job. I worked in marketing and advertising. And so I started quilting on my domestic machine. Now, my little fob back then, the opening was probably this big. I'm not kidding you. And I quilted many queen size quilts on that little machine. And probably put my chiropractor's first kid through college.
Yeah, that's probably
because you're like this the whole time. And in the 90s, machine quilting was really changing, and machine quilter Carol Breyer Fowler won at Houston, and the whole industry just went whoa. And so I started thinking about getting a long arm, and I managed to stumble upon a competitor of yours, but the two owners of those two companies were good friends. And I bought it from a lady who did decorator type stuff, where you do like hotel type bedding, like match the curtains to the duvet and all that. And it had an on-off button. I bought it for $600, and you'd have to like stop really quick. And I mean, there was no stitch regulator, that wasn't even invented yet.
Yeah.
And I just dabbled in it. I didn't really plan on making a big deal of it. And then I started seeing the ads for Gamble, and I thought, I think I really want that. And I was working full time, and my husband had an account in Missouri that wasn't too far, Bull Moose Tube. I'll never forget that name. But so we flew down to his account. He had a meeting, and then we drove to West Plains, and I bought it from Ken Gamble. And it was what we lovingly referred to in the early days as a minus.
And what year was this?
98, I want to say.
Okay.
And no stitch regulator, no bells and whistles. I mean, we were thrilled because it had needle up, needle down, needle positioner, I think they called it back in those days.
Cutting edge technology then.
Yeah, it was. And
did yours have a channel lock or no?
Yes, one way, just one way. Yeah, so that was like game changer. And for me, that back then, that was around $8,200, I want to say, for the whole thing. And they delivered it, dropped it off. And mind you, there's no YouTube videos, there's no classes, there's virtually nothing. And I got this thing, they set it up and left, and I'm like, oh boy. And about 4 years later, I bought my Statler. I had started to enter competitions, and most of my notoriety came from, quilting garments and entering in wearable art competitions, which there was a lot. And then I started winning with quilts, and I really was not going to quilt for hire. That was not my goal. I was going to be selfish. This was for me. And so when my friends started seeing my work, and I started getting things hanging in shows, and I was winning ribbons, I started to get inquiries, and I'm like, oh man, do I really want to do this? I have a company I run. I, have a very busy life. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to do this until I make the money back that I spent on it. Well, that kind of went
you
by
never
the wayside.
turned back from that point.
No. But it was just a wonderful journey, and I've been incredibly blessed to, meet so many wonderful people in the industry and to teach all over the country, and just share my passion. And it's so interesting because I was a little concerned that, and my husband brought this up, that when you turn something that you love to do into something that you have to do, sometimes there's a little bit of oh gosh, I got to go quilt this quilt that I don't really like. And I was worried about that, but it didn't happen. Granted, there were some quilts that I was like, oh boy, but overall, it's just been a great journey.
Sure. So I want to jump ahead a little bit because you explained that you had bought your first long arm and then you bought your second long arm, which was a Gamble in roughly 1998, and then you bought a Statler in around 2002. All of this time, you were still working full time.
Oh yeah, I was running my advertising agency, and so I'd get home from work, I'd make dinner, and then I'd go quilt for a few hours, and that went on for probably a decade. And the crazy thing is when you are a show quilter, you attract a lot of show quilting. And those that are in the business know that it's very time consuming and your production is very slow. And, you can whip 3 edge outs in a day, no problem. But, you might be a whole week on custom quilt. And if you're only doing it part-time, like I was, it could be even longer. So yeah, that was a little tricky dynamic that I wasn't expecting.
Basically had 3 jobs. You had your other job, you had your quilting, and you had taken care of the family too.
Yes. Well, trust me, there was not a lot of sleep in those early years, but the wonderful thing about machine quilting, especially for hire, I mean, obviously there's the joy of just doing it, but for hire, you're working on something that's fun. It's, the customer is bringing you this thing that they've worked on for however long, months, weeks, whatever it is, and you get to participate in their accomplishment. And that's a really good feeling. I mean, I've had people cry when they come to my studio and get their quilt back, and they're just so overwhelmed. I've finished quilts that mothers started in the 20s and 30s, and that became a family heirloom, and I never got any of that in advertising. So it's just it's a wonderful industry, and I've been incredibly blessed.
Well, yeah, and I see Jenn nodding her head with a lot of this also. That one thing you were talking about basically trauma in your life or bad things, that happen in your life can actually turn out to be something for the good, because it can cause you to get your priorities.
That's right.
Put the correct things, the important things take priority in your life.
Right.
And I see that in both of y'all's stories.
Yeah.
That you've been sharing. And I think that's also something that the people watching this podcast, everybody has different levels of trauma or bad things that happen in their lives. And I think seeing both of y'all's stories can be an inspiration to a lot of people, I believe, that are watching this right now.
Yeah, it's pretty common that whenever we face adversity like that, it makes you focus on the things that make you happy.
That's right.
Both of you went straight to what made you happy and turned out to just be extremely successful with it. So what a blessing that is.
Yeah, and I didn't really know what to expect, because I'd been in the corporate world and a driver and a business owner, and people working for me, and the whole, I created this, and that was one of the things that was probably pretty easy for me to get my quilting business off the ground, is because my background in marketing. And I could work or as much or as little as I wanted. And about the time that happened, I truly think it was a divine intervention, because I was working crazy hours at my company. I was working crazy hours at the quilting business. And, when you have something like that happen, it's a wake up call. And to take something that is a hobby, that is a creative outlet, and to turn it into something that is worthwhile and is, revenue generating. I mean, I can't even tell you what that meant, because, there was not the level of stress, and stress is a killer of your immune system. So if you have any kind of illness or any kind of weakness in your body, you get up every morning, you go, oh, I don't want to go to work today. You know, I never felt that. And that is truly an amazing thing. And if anybody's, struggling with that in their current situation, wondering whether they should take the leap and jump in and, actually start a business and go it alone, I would say absolutely do it. Don't even hesitate. I mean, back when I started, there was 2 machine quilters in my state. So it was a little different then, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But there's still opportunities. I mean, I know quilters that are making tons and tons of quilts every year. So, there's a lot of room.
So for you, Linda, you bought your first couple machines with the sole intention of using them for yourselves. Did you have any idea that there would be enough quilting business to sustain it as a full-time occupation for yourself?
No, and actually, that was the last thing on my mind. I was not going to go into business. When I bought the Statler, I felt a little bit guilty, because it was a significant bump in the price from the first one. But, my husband was very supportive, and he's like, look, I have a lot of expensive hobbies too. So, don't give it a second. You don't have to do this. But, I had no idea where this would go. And to think that this led me to a place of being able to travel the country and teach, to author a book, to design patterns, to design digital patterns, to have the kind of presence. I mean, obviously, I'm just a small fish in a very big pond. But to make friends with people all over the country, that's what, buying a Gamble and a Statler did for me. I mean, obviously I have a high work ethic. You're not going to just stand around and people are going to knock on your door. There's going to be some, effort on your part, big effort on your part to make it happen. But if you have the desire and the will, the sky's the limit.
Now, when you first started, now granted, it was decades ago. How did you get the funds to buy your first machine, second machine, third machine? Kind of, just for the people watching.
Yeah. Did you finance any of them, or did you?
Well, the blessing of being an entrepreneur is that you never know when your next paycheck is going to come from. So in my case, in my husband's case, it required us to become very much savers. And so when I got the first machine, that was just an easy little check. I mean, that was less than somebody's, car payment back then. The second machine was a little bit, bigger, which was a classic I bought then. And then the third machine was a big one. That was like the same as my Jeep, and we were fortunate enough, knowing, that we're savers and we don't live an extravagant lifestyle, that we were able to pay for it. But I did consider financing it. There were some really great deals with my bank. But I ended up not doing that. I had applied, and then my husband was like, just write the check.
Just do it.
But it didn't take me long to put that money back into our account from the business, because I have never priced per square anything. I've always priced by the job, and that requires that you understand how long it's going to take you to do something. I can load a queen size quilt in 20 minutes. So that's part of my billable time. And, designing the layout, what you're going to put down on the quilt, what kind of threads you're going to choose, the meeting with the client, that's all time. And you have to know exactly what that is in order to understand whether or not you're making money. And, back when I started, there was an ad. I used to advertise in Quilters Newsletter magazine in the back, a little classified ad. And that's where I got a lot of my customers. And there was a quilter in there. I have no idea what her work was like or whatever, but her headline in her ad was, "We'll quilt any top for $60." And I'd be like, you're working for free, even 25 years ago. Okay. And when I used to teach a business class, that's the one thing that I would always talk to students about is you have to know your costs. You have to know your hard costs and your soft costs. Okay, your hard cost is how much time you spent on that day on that quilt. That's you being engaged on the quilt. But there's also your phone, your insurance, and if you have a business, you're crazy not to have business insurance. Your website cost, any printed materials. When you go for education and you pay for, a hotel and you stay somewhere, those are all soft. I call those soft costs because, you're not actively participating in them, but they are the cost to run your business. So you have to look at it like any other business. I mean, you would never go into manufacturing a widget if you didn't know exactly what it was going to cost you to manufacture that widget. But sadly, I think there's a certain percentage in the industry that, well, I only need to make $15 an hour. Well, if you figured in all those other costs, you're really not making $15 an hour.
Yeah.
So that's just some advice that, I would have someone who's wanting to start out to really understand the whole picture.
So,
go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to confirm, you ultimately you meet with the customer when they're bringing you the quilt, and you go over all of these factors and you create like an individual quote for each quilt that you are going.
Yes.
That's fascinating. I've never heard that approach, probably because maybe there's a little more calculations and experience too, maybe even involved in what that works for you.
So you say you have never charged per square inch, and you always
and the reason I
charge for each individual one.
The reason I can do that now, I can give you a range. Like if you call me on your phone and you said, Linda, I've got this 12 block Dresden plate. What's it going to charge? What's it going to cost me? And then my first question is, well, what do you want on it? Do you want an edged edge? Then that's this price. And I know what a typical edged edge of that size is going to cost, regardless of what the pattern is.
Sure.
Well, no, I really want little feathers and all the little blades of the Dresden plate. Okay, that's going to cost this. And the only reason that I know that is because for the first 2 years that I was quilting, I wore a stopwatch. And I would, when I go to the bathroom, I hit it. When I answer the phone to talk to that customer that calls me 10 times to find out if her quilt's done, those are things you can't charge for, but you need to know, in my opinion, what you're actually doing on any given quilt. And you do, a few hundred quilts a year, you come to a real clear understanding. I mean, if you call me and said, I've got a, drunkard's path and I want you to outline every block and, it's a king size quilt, I can pretty much tell you and come really close to what that would cost because I kept track of that. Again,
yeah, you simply established the data that allows you to do that still to this day.
Do you think, Linda, that you are a mathematical genius?
No, but in my former industry,
because I'm getting the feeling that you're like the Isaac Newton of the quilting community.
Well, I am just a little bit type A, just a little bit.
A little bit. I think there's more than a little bit going on.
Yeah, my former golf pro, when I was learning how to play golf, and I was really super intense, and he's like, Linda, you're not type A, you're a triple A. And that's not everybody's skill set, but I do think it's interesting. So let me give you an example of why this system works versus the square per inch thing. Okay, let's say I have two customers that make a Dresden plate quilt, okay, and they call me and they say it's a queen size and I want you to do this on it. Now, one of those quilts has 12-inch blocks and the other quilt has 6-inch blocks. Now, I'm basing it on the perimeter of the quilt, okay, to get the square, whatever, inch, foot, yard, whatever, however you charge. But there's twice as much work on the one as there is on the other. So if I'm charging per the square pricing, then I'm taking a bath on the one.
Right.
And
I have a question real quick for you. And so are you charging per project on anything, even edge to edge, or is it because you do mostly custom that because I would do per project on a custom, but on edge to edge, I do per square inch. So
on edge to edge, I have a size. So it's
okay.
It's queen, twin, double, baby, king, and
then whatever
easy
falls
custom,
close to that.
easy custom, heavy custom. I mean, easy edge to edge, where it's just something simple or more involved. Because some of the edge to edge
Snowflakes.
patterns can take 45 minutes to run
Right.
across the
For
quilt.
one row. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
snowflakes.
I had two categories for that. And then custom, I had so many blocks was this custom price for a queen. So
Okay.
many, these blocks was this price for a king or a queen or whatever it is. Because I found that I was losing money by the square. So I ditched that like early on. And,
Okay, that's interesting.
once you understand your time factor and
Yeah,
you
I don't have the
understand,
experience that you have.
and the only way you're going to do that is if I have a work order, every single quilt that I did, I kept track of my
You
time.
watch.
I wrote it down on the work order, the intake form, which has got all the customer information. Then
Yep.
on the back, I would have how much time it took me to do the border, how much time it took me to do all the blocks. And then that made it super easy for me to come up with a schedule that is, category based, like custom is this, heirloom show is this for each size. And then I
Right.
can give you a range, pretty close to that. And I got to a point where I didn't really have to do any math because I tracked my time.
Okay. Thank you for your input. That's so interesting. I
Sure.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I know when I first floated this idea out in the, when I was teaching that class, like at the machine quilting shows, people were like,
Ah,
Yeah, that was earth shattering.
yeah, I don't know how many adopted it. I mean, I still see the square inch, but I'm saying, well, if I made a 12-inch block and you made a 6-inch block, our quilts are the same size, you know. Now, and it says
but it would be the same.
that's an
Right.
easy, right? But when you get into
That's
semi-custom
what
or
made me wonder if
custom,
you were doing mostly custom on these.
then
Yeah.
I did do probably more custom than edge to edge because obviously people would see my work
Show
at Lowe's
quilter.
and go, I want that.
Right.
But the same mix applies no matter whether it's an edge to edge or not, because some people are even, doesn't matter what the edge to edge pattern is, they're charging the same. And you got the one that it could run across the quilt in 10 minutes, and you got the other one that takes 45 minutes. Well, you're
Right.
losing your fanny on the second one.
That's right.
Yep, because your equipment is tied up in that time period.
Well, and it's
which
just
is, 3 or 4 times the amount, which is drastic.
exactly.
Now, we've got a question here from someone watching with us as Holly. She asks, what kind of requirements do you have for a quilt back? How much extra per side do you recommend or require? Does the backing need to be squared up, etc.?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, for me, my job is to help educate my customers in a way that makes my job easier, right? So when someone sends me a quilt and I've got, 3 inches on either side and my clamps are gonna run into it, or I've got to I have a little trick on the other end of the Velcro strip. I sewed a little triangle, a little rectangle of fabric, and then I could slide the clip over the other end and then just pin that to the edge of the backing. And then when I would get close to it, the machine wouldn't, hit it, flip out, but I always try to educate the customers as to what I really need to make their job the best it can be. And in the rare case that didn't happen, then I would keep strips of fabric around and I would just chunk them down as I would go, so the backing's wider. And then I would charge them for that. And when you give it back to them and there's all this stuff hanging off the edges of their quilt, and they're like, what is this? Oh, well, that's the extra I had to add because your backing wasn't big enough. They will never bring you a backing that's not big enough again.
That's a great little learning tool, isn't it? Charging them a little more.
But
Wow.
I was very, very fortunate in that when I started, I had some of the same clients I still have a client that I'm quilting for right now that I've had since the very beginning. And when you start them out right as to what you require, it's pretty easy to get people to do what you need. Now, every once in a while you get one that's like, this was all they had in the quilt shop. And I said, you know what, just sew some strips on the edges and sew some strips on the bottom, and I'll load close to the top so that I don't run out, getting down to the bottom. And I never really had a problem with it. Squaring up the backs, most of the time you can pin it square or you can, magnet square, whichever method you use to, whether you're using leader grips or red snappers or whatever it is you use. I got pretty good at not having to square up the quilt and trim off fabric. And, I think one of the things that's probably more of a challenge than a lot of people would want to admit to are some of these wide backs that are wonky, and I don't know. I always try to pin salvage to salvage, or, snappers salvage to salvage on the leaders rather than the other way around, which sometimes you're quilting the quilt sideways and you got to get really creative. That doesn't work with edge to edge, but it does work with custom.
Well, I'll tell you, we could go for hours listening to this stuff. But unfortunately our time is limited and we're getting closer to the end. But what I'm getting out of what you're saying there, Linda, is, when you first started talking about having a stopwatch and everything, I'm saying, this woman's crazy. What is she? But after listening to you going through it all, because I'm the type that probably does not invest on the front end the way I should with that type of thing. But you established ways of doing things, put forth the effort to establish, and now it's just effortless. You can just explain how it works just like that. And I think that's a good inspiration for a lot of the people watching, to put in the energy on the front end to establish a good way of doing things. So
yeah, that is just you guys both.
I think the most important thing that I would tell people that are new or that are struggling or that are thinking of getting into the business is track your time in the beginning. You're going to probably go by what's happening price wise in your area, your region of where you live or where you're drawing your quilts from. But keep track of your time, because for years I would hear people say, "Oh man, I lost my butt on this custom quilt," and I'd be like, "I'm making money." Because I understood, and it's not for everybody. I mean, I've had $1,200 quilting bills, and customers that know what they want and they're willing to pay it. Now I know that's going to freak out a bunch of people, but you have to understand what you're worth, and I think that's the biggest struggle that I see in the quilting for hire industry, is that a lot of people undervalue their skill set. I mean, I just had a plumber come and look at a thing in my house, and before he walked in the door, it was $120.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, well, everyone else's time is incredibly valued in these individual trades in the same way that it should be for you all. And knowing your worth, and I would probably highly recommend most of you to use Linda's method to try and get and more of an in-depth idea as to what other costs and time may be directly associated with the quilts that you do, because you may find that that you're losing money in areas that are not fair to you. And both of you ladies have just shared such an incredible wealth of information here with us tonight. Jenn, Linda, you're both fascinating to listen to. Your experiences are very different, but you both have had the same result in establishing a successful business, and we congratulate you both on that.
Well, thank you. One last thing I would like to add regarding that is, don't ever let a customer talk you out of what you're worth. And I have a little quick story to tell you. So I had this lady call me. She kept calling me, "How much for this quilt? And I'd like to bring it by. I've seen all your work. My friends have hired you, blah, blah, blah." And I told her the price, and she goes, "Oh, that much?" And I said, "Yes, that much." "Well, you can think about it and let me know."
Yes.
And so, a few more phone calls from her. "Well, can you give a senior citizen discount?" "No, I don't discount my work. I'm sorry, but you're welcome to come by if you'd like to bring it." And about 3-4 phone calls, and she finally agrees to come by. So she brings me this quilt. Now, I'm not making this up. She pulls up in a Mercedes S-Class. The ring on her finger is about the size of a dime, the diamond. And she's wearing a St. John suit. And if those of you know designer fashion, that's not an expensive little outfit. And she wants me to give her a $25 discount. And I'm just like, so don't fall into that trap. Know your worth.
Correct. You don't need to be taken advantage of. In fact, most of these people are hiring you in the same way they would hire Picasso to paint a painting for them, because your finished product is an art all the same.
That's right. And also, I have a $60,000. Mine's 60 because I purchased it wrong and should have punched Statler out of the gate. But I have a $60,000 machine to be able to do this work. And so, in a house that is a complete quilt world in here, we live. I mean, one room's a sewing room, one room's a quilting room, one room's a fabric room. And so there's more to it. And I spend a lot of time on the phone. I spend a lot of time with clients on the phone, and you do need to track all that. That's a really good tip.
Well, we moved into
you forget about all the soft costs.
Yeah. Well, we moved it just so you feel a little bit better, Jen. We moved into this house. We custom built this house, and I have my dream studio, and it's 1,600.
I will too in 3 years.
It's 1,600 square feet.
That's amazing. Mine will be 24 by 26. So it's going to be pretty big, but not that big.
And it's heaven.
Good for you.
Well, you've earned it.
Yeah. And guess what? My quilting business paid for it.
Yeah. Good for you.
That is freaking awesome. Well, I tell you, is it time for us to wrap up?
I think it is.
Okay. Well, listen, ladies, we could easily go another hour here, but we can't.
Okay.
I would love to. We would love to have y'all back on again. But before we go, Jenn, website, give us your information.
Oh, it's www.sierraquiltco.com. So sierraquiltco.com.
Awesome.
Excellent. And Linda, a lot of people probably know your name. Give us your website.
It's thequiltedgoose.com. And nobody ever gets why I named my company The Quilted Goose. What do geese have?
Down.
Feathers.
Feathers.
Yeah.
Oh, how cute. I was like, down.
Okay, yeah.
Linda, what's your last name?
Thielfoldt. Thielfoldt.
Pronounce that again.
Teal, like the color. This is what I tell my students when I teach. Teal, like the color blue-green. Folt, like a baby horse with an F.
Okay, Thielfoldt. Very good.
You have too many consonants in your last name.
It's those Germans. I'm married into it. I had a really simple name.
Yeah. Well,
came with a great guy, so what am I going to do?
If you end up typing Linda's name into YouTube or Google, you'll probably find out real quick that she's pretty famous in the quilting world. So we're very thankful to have you. And
just as a plug for Gamble, there's 12 videos that I taped out at Ricky Tim's studio for Gamble, probably a decade ago, on thread and tension and loading and quilting ideas. I think there's 12 of them.
Yeah, and if you type
I was a little younger then.
If you type in Linda Thielfoldt Gamble or the Quilt Show Gamble, you'll be able to find Linda's videos. I've watched them. They're great. I've been fanboying over you for a while in the quilting industry, so it's very nice to formally meet you tonight.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah, what a pleasure speaking to both of you. So we hope you both have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And hopefully all of our audience will reach out to you guys with anything they may need.
Any questions.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm all over social media too. So
me too.
I have a business page and
personal, and
so yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, look these ladies up. I just want to say FYI before we go, anyone that feels like you need more education, training, whether it be for business or for the quilting part of it, go to gamble.com and there's lots of resources available.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Are we done?
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Ladies, thank you so much.
All
you
right.
guys are the bomb.
See ya.
Have a Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Same
Merry
to you.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.